Thank you everyone for joining us for the third panel in our ongoing Immersive Tech panel series. My name is Jameson Spivak, and I'm a senior policy analyst with the Future of Privacy Forum, where I lead the organization's work on immersive technologies. Today's panel will be focused on the technical, legal, and policy questions around immersive tech in the context of vehicles and the automotive industry. Before handing over to my colleague Adani to kick off the conversation, I want to place this panel in the context of the overall series. Immersive technologies like virtual reality, spatial computing, and neurotechnologies are changing the way we work, play, learn, take care of our health, and much more. At the same time, privacy legislation is gaining momentum around the US, and regulators have indicated they will use their Consumer Protection Authority to address privacy issues in digital technology industries. It's not always clear how privacy laws would impact immersive technologies differently than other types of technology. But on a deeper level, there are also questions about the new privacy risks that arise when immersive technologies are integrated into domains like health, advertising, and education. As these technologies become part of our everyday lives, it is critical to understand their capabilities, their unique risks, how regulatory proposals might address them, and best practices organizations can adopt to protect people's privacy. Through a series of panels, we seek to address these emerging questions by asking, what is unique or new about immersive tech? In July, we looked at immersive tech in the context of health and wellness, discussing how these technologies could greatly improve health outcomes, but could also threaten user privacy by enabling inferences of sensitive personal information without proper safeguards. Last month, we looked at immersive advertising, touching on how platforms and advertisers will need to think about the best ways to inform users about their data collection practices. And next month, on October 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, our next panel will focus on immersive tech in the education sector. But today we're focusing on vehicles, so I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Adani Washington, Policy Counsel for FPF's Data, Mobility, and Location Workstream, who will moderate today's discussion.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining. I'd love to introduce our wonderful panelists that we have today, just before giving a bit of background kind of on what we're going to be discussing. So we have Dr. David Godeka from Cornell Tech, and he is the author of Shroom, or XROOM, a mixed virtual driving simulation with real cars and environments safely. Next, we have Daria Fedko, co-founder and CEO of We Are, or We AR Studio, and it is an AR VR development company. Welcome. And finally, we have Michael Cole from who's Managing Counsel, Research and Development at Mercedes-Benz North America. He has some background on privacy in that space as well. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for joining. So I believe we have a very mixed audience. So I don't want to assume, if you're familiar with the tech and privacy space, you know that we love acronyms and we throw them around very frequently. So I'd love to share a few and give a few that might be necessary for this panel, and give a bit of background. As Jameson mentioned, immersive tech in vehicles, two concepts put together, but what does that actually mean in reality? It could relate to augmented reality for a driver, or it could mean virtual reality for designing and manufacturing the vehicle. It could mean a number of different incorporations of new and emerging technology in the world of cars across the board and at every stage. Before we get into our phenomenal panel, again, here are a couple of acronyms. So we have augmented reality, AR, a view of the physical world with an overlay of digital elements. This might be for a driver who is seeing their directions projected onto the street in front of them. Virtual reality, a fully immersive digital environment in which a world is the user's main experience rather than their physical space. And we have mixed reality, MR, a view of the physical world in which digital elements interact with the physical environment and vice versa. We also have advanced driver assistance systems, ADAS, or pronounced ADAS, and we also have driver monitoring systems, DMS. These two systems are frequently seen in cars today. Most of you probably have been in a car or have a car that has one and or both of the features. They are used together to improve safety, and these systems, driver monitoring systems specifically use cameras to ensure that the driver is paying attention to the road. And then ADAS systems includes things like automatic emergency braking, lane departure warnings, blind spot detection, and other types of crash prevention technology. They work best when combined together. So before we jump in, some of the trends that you'll hear today do jump between some of the different ones. I ask my panelists to the extent that you're not talking about both of them or all three of them. I ask that you definitely distinguish. And for more and kind of an in-depth image of what we're talking about when we talk about these different types of technologies, our immersive tech team put together a wonderful infographic earlier this year. And Jameson will share that in the chat so that others can kind of look at that if you need a bit more of the connections drawn for you. So in addition to talking about some of the features, we'll of course get into some of the privacy implications. There's lots of sensor data that is involved in immersive technologies and what that looks like in addition to how companies are handling that and how those who are in the research and development side of things think about those data points. So my first question, and I'd love to hear a bit from each of you, what types of immersive technology are being tested or used in the vehicle or automotive space that you have personal experience with or work closely with? David, you are to my right, if you wouldn't mind going first.
I think one specific type of virtual reality that I would assume most people will have seen these other kind of virtual reality or mixed reality headsets that you strap to your face that look like very big glasses. Specifically, I've been using the like Varjo headsets because they are kind of like higher grade headsets that have high resolution, both as in cameras that capture the surrounding as well as high resolution displays that shows a virtual world to the participant or to the user of the technology. And so we've been mostly working on integrating these kind of technologies, these kinds of headsets into the vehicle. So because they tend not to really be developed to be deployed in a moving reference frame, which is a car or a train, anything that moves. And so we've been spending some time on using this kind of sort of wearable VR headsets, head-mounted displays, as they often call. Yeah.
And just a quick point of clarification on that, David.
Mm-hmm.
You say the headsets in the vehicles, do you mean for the driver and passenger? Do you mean one or the other, or using kind of testing all the ways?
Yeah, so we've been mostly testing them in all the ways. So the early tests were just as a passenger to make sure that these systems obviously work. And it's also one of these things where like, just driving in a car makes some people sick, and then some other people also get sick with VR headsets, and we weren't sure if these kind of problems would compound each other and we would end up in a really uncomfortable situation. Turns out this is actually, if you do it well and the refresh rates of what the participant is seeing fast enough, it's not a big problem. But this was sort of the first step, and so the recent studies, we actually also had the driver wear these headsets and have them, drive through virtual worlds or sort of mixed reality worlds. Yeah.
Thank you, Daria.
Yeah, well, as we work as a service agency, we have different types of requests from our clients and from vehicles industry as well. So what we've been working on is augmented reality for promoting the new car or vehicle on the market, selling or upselling some accessories. When you scan your car and you can drag and drop new accessories to your car, or you can upgrade it with a new version, we also used augmented reality for the in-car experience. When one of the other agencies, they were working on the new concept of for the driver monitor, and they wanted to present this concept through augmented reality without changing the physical component of the car. Then we used virtual reality for training and education in the manufacturing. So there is a thing for the changing the manufacturing line for the electric cars. So they have to change all of the production line, and their engineers who've been working for 20 years with this same production line, now they have to learn how to work with new machines and equipment. And there is also an emotional barrier, like, I've been working with this for 20 years, why should I do this now? And virtual reality and mixed reality is also helping them to adapt these changes. They can see how we're going to change in the future, like in 1, 2, or 3 years, through virtual reality simulation or mixed reality add-on, when they use mixed reality glasses in the training center, and they can work with the training materials and equipment through mixed reality, and they can already see the value of this technology, and they can see how it's going to look like in the future. So this is in a nutshell, but mostly it was marketing, promotion through virtual reality and mixed reality and augmented, all types of realities, because it gives the high level of engagement. You can tell this story, and the end customer can fall in love with this story and really feel the value of the new car or concept or something. So yeah, that is what we've been working on.
Amazing. And I do have a point of clarification for you when you're talking about the marketing advertising side of things. Just so we're all clear, do you mean an individual would go into a dealership, or is this also something that you're working on for a home localized experience, or what would that look like?
It was all types of experiences in the dealership, at home, and also at the closed presentations when they like launched the new car first time, and they only presented to the journalists and media, and they have disclosed events. They also used augmented reality to promote it better. Or, for example, they launched a new car in a very small room, and there was no chance for them to do the test drive, for example. So we used virtual reality for this virtual test drive for the media and journalists, and that was also kind of hype for them, because virtual reality was on the hype at that moment of time, and the new car and everything. It was like a perfect match.
Perfect. Thank you. And Michael, love to ask you the same thing.
Yeah, sure. I should lead off by clarifying that so I'm a lawyer at Mercedes-Benz, and so anything that I say here today is just my personal thoughts, reflections. Is not as a spokesperson or saying anything on behalf of Mercedes-Benz. So please bear with me. So some projects at a high level that I've worked on closely with in my line of work is largely focused on artificial intelligence, or AI, and how AI can basically improve the experience and safety of the vehicle. But one big experience factor lately would be the beta program that we have established, and ChatGPT's integration to our voice system, our Hey Mercedes voice feature. And then, of course, some machine learning projects, some autonomous driving or ADAS, and other sensor technology in the vehicles.
That's perfect. And actually, kind of a perfect segue into my next question. So, Michael, if you wouldn't mind taking this one first. Well, I guess one of my first questions, as you started to, you mentioned work on AI, how did that intersect with kind of the conversations as they moved towards immersive tech? What kind of challenges did you maybe see as you were trying to get right to these benefits, to the end result in incorporation?
Where to begin? Maybe start at the beginning of the high level. So some of the experiences that we're looking for obviously are going to be improving the overall experience. And by the overall experience, I mean, how does the end user of this technology, how are they benefiting from it, right? How's their safety being improved? How's the feel? One thing that my line of work is concerned with is that luxury feel. Are we being seamless? Are we making things easy for them? Are we giving time back? Are they being entertained, informed, as well as being made safer? So those are the goals, right? Of all this is all the better things. But obviously, there's a lot of other things that are part of the equation, which are, what information are you collecting? How are you getting from A to B or A to Z, as it were? How are you communicating this in a way that makes the person feel informed, and they can make good decisions, and they feel comfortable also? Because if they don't feel comfortable, you've lost them anyways. You've done no good. And so, yes, I think, of course, we looked at those factors. And I think another thing I look at closely is also on the technical side of things. How is this data, or how is this whole model set up from a technical perspective? Are there actual technical protections in place from one system connecting with another system? And how are things basically arranged on the back end in a safe manner, right? And so that certain protections are already built in, so it will operate smoothly, but also in a safe manner too.
Perfect. David, actually, I'd love to go to you. I know we talked a bit about, understanding what this looks like in cars, and how you all at the research side of things are also thinking through the data and ensuring that these same kinds of tests and research can be duplicated and really kind of showing the work. What would that look like, in a research context as you are publishing the papers and reports? How are you kind of sharing that data, and also reconciling with the collection of it, and what to do with it?
Yeah, so this is still also very much an open question, not only within the context of AR, but in general for human-computer interaction as we move closer and closer towards design, and sort of design and HCI are sort of meeting somewhere. The main thing that we try to do to make sure that work can be replicated, and we don't spend like the main motivating factor for us is obviously to share the work that we do, but also to minimize that people have to replicate things that already work or exist, so that we can really move forward as a field, while and doing all of this while like respecting the privacy of the people that we have as participants, right? Part of what we do, it's just very detailed documentation, right? All of our code that we do is open source. All of the systems that we have built down to the detailed hardware that we use is documented in our papers, so that technically someone could go and either buy something similar or like replicate the system based on the information available, download the code, ideally use it, maybe rebuild it based on the information that is available in it. Obviously, good documentation is always good, and takes more time than we maybe have available, but that's ultimately the goal. For sort of data that we've collected from participants, that's one important point where I think there isn't really a really good answer available yet. And I think that the field itself is working towards this. Is actually, I'm just coming from a workshop at a conference here in Germany, where we've been talking exactly about this, about like how can we do data sharing, what is allowed under the law, what is ethically okay, and in many ways also the motivation is there's also to make sure that we don't want to run duplicated studies, right? Like once we have generated data, what can we do that we don't have to run these things again? Yeah, there are many different ways. One way that we've been doing is that we publish data sets as well. So this is not something that I have done myself. I want to be very explicit there. This has happened within our research group. So I'm supervised by Professor Wendy Chu at Cornell Tech, and she has published data sets before. And the way that this usually works is that the data set is available, but we then have to go through our own IRB, vet basically other research proposals if people want to use this data that we've collected, and then there's basically a process to obtaining this data. It's not just like a download or a zip file that lies on a server somewhere, but there's like a process to ensure that the data is used correctly. And there are also various anonymization processes that will take place to make sure that no one's like privacy is invaded, or like that they're exposed in a way that they didn't agree to when running the study.
Thank you. I think we've seen kind of two ends, and I think, Daria, you operate in this perfect space in between kind of both where David works and where Michael works, in terms of looking at research to then help develop the tools, but then also working with clients to ensure that the tools are being developed to their specific needs, and that the research is kind of there to back that. I'm curious as to how you handle that, sitting in the middle, and being sure to protect the client's information and answer their data questions should they have them, but also really working with what research does exist in this space as it's still developing.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really sitting in between the request from the client and the things that is ethically and like on all levels is okay to do. I mean, in data collection and privacy and everything. And David, you mentioned the ethical thing in here. It is, I also wanted to emphasize on that. Well, I will answer the first part and then the ethical thing. So yeah, what we do is we collect data. We do in augmented reality, in virtual reality, and usually it is based on what our clients want about the user experience, how people behave in virtual reality or augmented reality, how many times they interact with this object or that experience, how much time do they spend, what do they say during the experience, how do they behave in that or this simulation. In some specific cases, we can even collect the data about the body motion. We can create the body motion heat map. It is very unique and personal data. For example, the gaze, how your eyes are moving around the virtual environment for how long. And based on that information, we can analyze and make some assumptions on how your attention is moving while you're using virtual reality or augmented reality. In augmented reality, you can collect and analyze data from the external cameras, for example, and the same in the newest virtual reality glasses that have these external cameras and they have access to your environment, and you can analyze the environment of the user. So like it's tons of different data and different metrics you can analyze it. But we have privacy policy and we have to communicate to the end customers and ask for their permission to collect this data and have access to the camera or to the body motion heat map and so on and so forth. This is in the ideal world. If you go to the stores, if you go and check some of the apps on the market out there, it's not always like that. For example, Apple and App Store in general, they have some regulations, and there is specific rules for augmented reality permissions to use your camera and feed from camera and so on. In virtual reality, it's not that regulated, so actually it's still a shady field. So you can do both. You can create the privacy policy, you communicate it to the end customer and ask for their permission. In other ways, other applications are not communicating that at all, and they're just collecting data and that's it. And nothing is regulating that at the moment. So I mean, the stores where you're publishing the app, or it totally depends on the developer or publisher or the owner of the application. And the ethical question is very important in here as well. And this is what triggers me a lot, because specifically in virtual reality and in mixed reality, when you have these wearables, when you have these glasses, you have access to very personal type of data, body, gaze. Some of the VR glasses even give you the data on the cognitive load and how your brain reacts to this or that experience. And it is even more than personal data. It is in-depth data. Even the end customer couldn't say you how their brain reacts to this or that, but the virtual reality glasses can give you these numbers and statistics and everything. So that's the thing. And every time we talk to our clients and we discuss the projects, we usually discuss the data we can collect. And there is some basic data, like how long do they spend in the application, what is the average user session, how do they interact with the objects, especially when we talk about training and education in virtual reality. It is essential to have this data tracking and analytics, because this is how you can understand the progress of the learning experience and how people learn some of the specifics like soft or hard skills in virtual reality. It is essential to have that. But in other cases, it is mostly the decision of the owners. How do they want to collect and analyze this data, and how do they want to emphasize on that? In our case, we always create the privacy policies and we communicate it to the end customers. This is our responsibility as a development team, and we have to communicate it to the clients we work with.
Great. Thank you, Daria. A kind of lead in, and I do apologize to my panelists because we've kind of jumped around a bit for questions. And so I do actually want to come back to a question that kind of we had listed and Daria kind of touched on just then, and I want to open it to all of you. When we were talking about, the experience and what individuals are trying to, what the end user is trying to get out of this, if you're like me, when I first started thinking about immersive technology and vehicles, I thought distraction and a bit of concern. I drive in DC and there's plenty of distraction as is. So I'm curious as to how in your work or just in your thoughts and what you know kind of about the space, what risks may be associated with immersive tech that might potentially create a more distracted environment? And then on the other side of things, are some of those concerns myths? Do they not really exist? How is safety really being incorporated into these technologies and the process to kind of get there and ensure that? Michael, I saw you on mute.
Oh, I thought David was going to go first.
You go, and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, it's a real concern, right? Because again, the end goal is to make things easy or better or improve, which you're not doing that if you're distracting people. So there is a lot of thought has to go into how is this being presented. I mean, how big are certain things? I mean, you can have such powerful, helpful safety benefits to using this technology. You can virtually drive when you can't see with your own eyes. You can drive through a bunch of fog, for example. You could. I'm not encouraging it, please don't, but you could, right? And so, and that can be very helpful. And you can identify, the technology can identify various, road conditions, and you can see 360 degrees around you through your hood. I can't tell you how many of my kids' toys have been saved because of my surround view camera in my car, right? As I'm pulling into the garage or backing out, or beeping when I'm getting close to, bumping up the side of the garage, for example, or whatever. You guys have all seen this technology probably in your cars. So it can be very helpful. You can even have, I think Daria was mentioning this a little bit, but you can see eye movement. You can detect, one, distracted driving. Two, you can detect if the cognitive load is too high, or if you're becoming worn down and tired. Maybe suggest a break. Distraction though, what color, how are you presenting these things is very important. And a lot of time and energy needs to go into evaluating that end of the safety too. I mean, what kind of font is it? How big is the font? Where's it located? What's the sound? How often are you going to ping somebody? I think there's a lot of energy going right now into figuring out, even from a broader scale, how to standardize some of these features too, right? This goes into your safety certification of the vehicle too. Are you putting out a inherently dangerous vehicle if it's really highly distracting, for example? It's a great question, and it has to be analyzed as part of the certification process. And so I think that there's work being done and work to do yet on that front, especially as we can find greater alignment across the industry on what is or is not maybe dangerous or distracted. At the same time, this is a complex ball of wax. At the same time, what's new can often be a little bit distracting until you adjust to it and learn. And so people buying these cars are continually getting more and more used to the technology. And so they're also adapting to it as well. So you have sort of two sort of code developing and factors here, if not probably more than two, but many code developing factors at the same time. But it's a very important question. And so there's a balancing of more or less how are you communicating information or the experience you're providing to the person, if they're actually being benefited from it, is you don't want to show them a big map that blocks their view and distracts them on where they're going with their navigation. That defeats the purpose, even if it is really pretty. So yeah, it's a very good question.
Yes, I've asked you all here to solve all of the concerns and issues that we've had. That is, did I not tell you that?
Good progress, right?
Yeah. David, would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one thing that is always important to remember when we're talking about these sort of immersive techs is that they are being developed and they're being deployed within the context of sort of vehicles that also contain advanced driver assistance systems, right? And they are becoming, more and more advanced, every year. And one of the things that we know from studies as well is that it's actually, like as the what used to be a driver who is in charge of all of the functions of the vehicle now becomes much more someone who monitors the vehicle. We actually know from studies that it's a better idea that they are distracted with something, because in the moment when they need to take over, it is much better that they are awake, because people tend to be really bad at monitoring, especially if nothing is going on, right? So, at that point, when we have a monitoring system, just as Michael mentioned, that can monitor the driver as well as the road itself, we sort of enter a really interesting era of sort of human machine teaming. Now, I'm not an expert in human machine teaming, but the question is like, if we realize we are now on a highway and there for the next 3 or 4 miles, we will just be going basically straight, maybe it's a good time for the vehicle to take over more of the driving responsibility or driving task, and then have the human be distracted for a while, so that then after, when we realize maybe things change and we can be sure that the driver can be trusted again when they're awake again, to take over these driving tasks more again. Obviously, right, there is a lot of change that needs to happen and there's still a lot of development, but ultimately we want to understand that this technology might be deployed in a context more like this one, right? So sort of understanding human machine teaming as part of the equation. Yeah.
Perfect. And Daria, did you have any comment on this piece?
Yeah, I think that they said that listening to music is distracting or talking on phone is distracting, but right now it's our routine and we cannot even imagine driving a car without listening to the music. So I think the same will happen with the mixed reality or any type of reality they call it in future. I can imagine it's like glasses like this one. If you tried Ray-Ban with Meta, they have these external cameras, and the next edition should have these streaming capabilities. So you can imagine you're driving in glasses like this one with embedded augmented reality, with some of the assistance or some ways we can enhance the driving experience or make it safer, or help them focus on some things that we need them to focus on while they're driving. So I approach it from the user experience perspective. And I think that we can enhance so many things with the mixed reality while being a driver. So yeah, for sure it will distract for the first time, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a part of our everyday routine. So it's only a question of user experience for me.
No, I think all of you made a great point about we have kind of different features in the car that might already be slightly distracting, or at one point were considered more distracting. And like you said, Daria, music is now second nature. If I get into the car and it's silent, I'm very confused, and somehow do not drive as well. So I kind of want to turn to a more specific aspect, and this might be just kind of a disjointed thought, but David, you also mentioned thinking about the movement, right? Being in a car and the movement that happens is different from if I'm standing in my living room, and using a headset. So I'm curious how you're handling just some of the general challenges with actually deploying some of this technology. David, in your context in the research, you've actually worked on the actual deployment. So I'm curious what that looks like. Daria, from your perspective, I'd be curious to know what actual challenges come with literally incorporating the technology, right? Putting it to use in everyday context. And Michael, I'd be interested as well, from your perspective, if there's any, incorporating the hardware into the vehicle, or rationalizing how to handle physical elements that also have to be incorporated for this.
Sure, I can maybe give a small technical overview of why this is a little bit more difficult than maybe the VR in your home, right? So, what we're trying to solve are basically spatial tracking problems. So by spatial tracking problems, I just need to figuring out a simple spatial tracking problem is figuring out where something is. And like phones can do this nowadays really well, right? Like you can, and the iPhone, I don't know about Android, they have features where you can like measure your room, and it's figuring out where the phone is and how it moves through the space. And that's exactly also what VR headsets do. And like the very common the Meta Quest that has cameras, it does inside out tracking, so it figures out where are elements in the room, and between the camera frames, how has it shifted. Now, if we want to do this in transportation, like cars, trains, then we actually not need to solve this twice. We need to solve it once, figuring out where is the headset relative to the car, and then we need to figure out where is the car relative to the world and how has the car moved in the world, right? Now, this is more cameras and more trackers. There are like all kinds of sensors, from LiDARs and structured light and things like that. But ultimately, that's what needs to be solved. And the sort of the tracking problem for where is the car and where is it moving, that's already largely solved by these advanced driving assistance systems, right? So like the integration of this with the VR system is for a vehicle manufacturer, I think maybe not trivial, but they're already like solving a lot of these steps. Yeah, and so this is something that we within research we've been sort of trying to figure out: what are the requirements, what is the delay, what are the latencies that you need to achieve to do this. Yeah, but that's sort of the figuring out what these things are, where things are moving. Now, the technical challenge for why this has been difficult is that they are also one of the important sensors in these headsets are the inertial measurement units. These are the original units that figured out whether or not the iPhone is like in horizontal or vertical mode. These react to the acceleration felt on the device, and they're really important because they update really quickly as compared to cameras that are used for tracking. They update really slowly. And so if you combine both of these things, you have a really good idea of where the headset is at any given time. But they get really confused if you're in a car, because, you know, the cameras of the headset say like, I'm not moving at all, while, you know, while in the car, the motion sensor will say like, but I'm accelerating. So there's a conflict in sort of figuring this out and integrating all of these sensor systems together to figure out where the headset is in sort of a global reference frame. That is quite a tough call, especially if you're trying to make it work kind of everywhere.
Totally agree, David. I can relate to it. I can feel your pain. And yeah, when we talk about incorporating augmented, virtual, or mixed reality into the vehicles and adding it to the driving experience, it's quite a challenge at the moment, because you cannot use smartphones while you're driving. I mean, like augmented reality as it is. You cannot use virtual reality because you are caught off the real environment, and sometimes it is even challenging to set up the virtual reality set. I mean, the glasses and the controllers in the static room, and sometimes it's glitches and you have some bugs and it should understand the environment. There are a lot of factors that influence the experience. I mean, the lighting, the contrast places around you so that the camera can capture it and anchor the experience in regards to this environment, and a lot of this stuff. So in-car experience and virtual reality or augmented reality, it's not possible with the technologies we have at the moment. Like it's possible, but it will be a very poor experience, and our users will be crying towards the end, and we don't want it. So I think the research you're working on, David, right now, it should help a lot the industry and overall integrating the technologies into the cars. But from what we experienced recently is augmented reality, again, for marketing and promotion and brand communication. So the car brand is communicating to the end customer through augmented reality in their smartphones, not while they're driving. When they're just experiencing some features of the car and they can sit inside of the car and they can use some features of augmented reality, pointing their camera on different parts of their car, and then they can get additional information or play some games or receive some, I don't know, some VIP content or something like that. So at the moment, I saw some good use cases in regards of this integration, but I haven't seen something more sophisticated in terms of driving and using mixed reality simultaneously. It's not safe, it's not user-friendly at the moment, and there is not that many use cases where we can say like, yes, this is working and let's work towards that. So that's from my experience again.
Yeah, I would say I think Daria raised some really good points there. That obviously some of these technologies, there's a timing factor, right? What's available while the car is in motion, and what's available, at a park or otherwise, and to which passengers or driver, et cetera. So these are all very real considerations. And I think that we tend to think first on this question about how are we seeing it implemented. We think about the cameras aspect, rightfully so. It's collecting very personal data, right? Or could be very personal data. Cameras facing out and cameras facing in, right? In both directions. I think another aspect of that to consider also is the output of, right, when you're looking at this augmented reality and this immersive technology, is what the sensors translate into an output. So it's not always about, from my point of view, it's not always about what the camera sees, but what the camera makes happen. So, some other really good uses I've seen are basically leveraging existing hardware in the car, and it's just sort of taking over it. So, for example, if the sensors, cameras, whatever, pick up on maybe a possible impact, right? The car can actually adjust the seat, tighten the seat belt, and get you in a safer spot, adjust the airbag for where it's going to deploy, to what size human, in which direction, right, to make for a safer impact. The car itself can adjust its ride height to brace for impact, for a safer impact. So those are not what we maybe tend to think of in front of mind with augmented reality, but it is still the output of these sensors and what they essentially make happen in the vehicle for that user experience. That's a safety feature, of course, but you can also use those sort of different things to make the ride more comfortable, maybe help keep the driver more alert, those kind of things. Maybe, I don't know, maybe cool off the seat instead of warm it up or something, I don't know. But but those are different things that I have seen, and I think that some companies are really working with. And this is not new technology in and of itself. We've had AR and VR, et cetera, for a while, but I think we're really seeing it come into its own right now. And I especially think that, especially this overlay, right, of having AR, VR, immersive technology, et cetera, in the vehicle, I think the next 3 years will be especially maybe cool to see where it goes. I think you're on mute.
I was indeed. I think all of you have made really good points in highlighting how immersive technologies in the vehicle space have their challenges, but really have kind of forward-looking, useful benefits and impacts for the driver, be it before they're even in the vehicle or after. I think it's very important to see the color of car that you'd want and actually design and understand the experience. And then also, that sounds amazing, Michael. I would love for my car to really have some of these predictive features, especially cooling off the leather seats, amongst other things. So one other thing, as we get a bit kind of jumping back into privacy just a little bit, about 2 weeks ago, Mozilla Privacy Not Included arm put out a research report on privacy policies for vehicles. We've talked a little bit about, Daria, you mentioned kind of the privacy policies that you all employ on your end, but I'm kind of curious thinking about how might you articulate this and some of these data collection points to the average consumer, to that end user. Sometimes you might be talking, at the manufacturing stage and they have an understanding, or to a client area who has an understanding, or David, in your experience, to other academics, right? How would you articulate, we are collecting X, Y, or Z, or this technology needs whatever it is, whatever data points necessary to operate? How might you articulate that to an end user?
You should go first, Daria.
I could see it from your eyes. Okay, I will do that. Well, again, from our perspective of the development team, right? We have business case, we have our client, they have some goals, and we always consider augmented virtual mixed reality as a tool to help them gain this goal. In some cases, it's marketing campaign to increase brand awareness, to sell more, to increase engagement with the brand, and so on. In other cases, we help them train and educate their engineers and workers, and other cases. So I think the question number one is, what type of collected and analyzed data will help them gain this goal that they have? And not like over collecting all types of data and not going in depth, like the cognitive load and so on. We don't really need that for marketing campaign. The things we usually need is like the engagement rate, time spent, number of interactions, some basic things. So firstly, we have to communicate to our clients like, okay, we can collect this type of data. This is the basic package, I would say so. And let's go with this one that will help you understand ABCD. We can analyze it. You can use it for your future decisions in your business niche and so on. And then for sure, there is a decision from business. What type of data do they want to? And the second part is communicating it to the end customers and all of the, I would say, stakeholders of this process, right? Because it's not always only the end customers, it's also some dealerships or other components in this matrix of users. So I'm always voting for as much transparent communication as possible. So usually we have permission pop-ups, windows in the VR or AR application, and asking end customer give their permission on collecting this or that data, or giving their permission to this or that camera, and so on. So as transparent it is as possible, it's better. Not all of the developers do that for sure. And some of the data we collect in augmented reality, for example, is so obvious. Like when you have an access to the camera and you can collect the data on how many times they interacted with the object in augmented reality, it's super obvious. It's very standard. There is nothing specific about it. And I can understand and I can relate when some of the developers, they're not really paying attention to it and not communicating that type of data collection to the end customers, because they can think that it's not that important. But from the perspective of the end user, I think any type of data they collect and analyze is important, because for us, as for developers, it's like another AR or VR application we develop and publish on the market. For the end customer, it might be the first type of virtual reality experience or augmented reality experience, and they can be like 99% engaged in that experience. And it is important to have the first touch with the end customer and make it positive. Because if we collect some data and never be transparent about that, I'm afraid that there might be some conflicts around that, because I already heard a lot of things about it, like, oh, I used this virtual reality, it doesn't work, or I used augmented reality, it's not helping, or something like that. And I can predict that there could be some conflicts around the data collection as well. So firstly, we have to understand what type of data is helping business gain their goal. And second part, we have to communicate it to the end customers and being transparent as much as possible.
Yeah, so from the research point of view, I think it's important to point out that for us, when we run user studies, the process is always quite different, right? Like the number of participants we run is very small compared to an app that conceivably could be hosted by or like used by lots of different people. And so we often will run maybe 30 or 40 participants, and each of those will answer a consent form. They will have time to read through it. We will answer any questions they can pull out of the experiment at any time. Also afterwards, if they feel unwell about us using the data, we will delete the data. That said, we also record really, highly detailed. We have multiple video recordings going. We will record their gaze. We will Sometimes we will have biosensors that we will record with a high degree of detail. And so yeah, this is sort of, it sort of is it's a little bit on a different scale on the balance there. The communication with other sort of academics always goes, like, we always go through various steps of anonymization. There, there's sort of the concept of, blurring faces, things like that. Obviously, these things have limits. It's been proven so many times that, like, oh, actually, even if the face is blurred with these other like types of information, you can probably infer who it was given sort of time and place and things like that. So there's obviously a limit to what we can do. Also, you are interested in the information that is contained in the data. If you blur too much of it, the data loses its value, and then it kind of defeats the purpose. But yeah, so being very clear on that, anonymizing data before publishing it or making it available to others is part of it. Ultimately, I think that for the deployed technology that might be sort of customer facing, I think there is, we still need to understand what actually needs to be deployed, right? Like, we record lots of video feeds from participants from many different angles. However, it does not mean that a final system that needs to have this data, needs to use this data, or maybe there are different camera systems that don't store this data that can be used for tracking, for example.
I would add that I think this question might be the underrated, most complicated question, right, in the privacy space today, right? Is how are you communicating effectively with the person at the other end? Because especially if you look at bigger companies where you have some processes that are centralized, you have to look at, how do I take this one process and communicate it across multiple languages, and perhaps even more importantly, multiple cultures, right? And how do you make this, as we see increasingly demanded, make it really short, really clear, and really practical? And that's challenging. On the one hand, the easy answer is that, well, here's 1,000 pages, all the information you want, right here you go, and everybody's happy. And no, I'm kidding, they're not happy. How do you make the answers, again, easy to find, without going into too much detail that you lose somebody? Again, taking into account cultural differences even in the language that you're using and how you're explaining certain things, without telling two different stories around the same process. It is challenging. It's a worthy challenge, though. I think one that I think many people are taking on heads on. But I think that's exactly it. Where do you put the information? At what point in the flow do you have just-in-time notices versus something that's really apparent? In the head unit, in the owner's manual, etc. I think it's a mixed bag, but it's a very much a lot of critical thought and a step-by-step process, and how you give the effective notice and communication about what's going on here, to be as transparent and honest as possible. But you can lose somebody in too many details or too many technical details, especially if you're not familiar with it. My goal is always to get any notice down to a 6th grade reading level. I don't think I've ever done that, but it remains my goal, and I do it. I try as hard as I can to get there, for sure. For example,
I think that's great.
Sorry, I just wanted to make one small addition, especially about this, is one of the things, and this is not work that I've done, but like researchers in like at my university have worked on this, the point of like change in context as well, right? Like, you sit in a car, you say like, sure, I now have this VR headset on and I'm using it. What happens if other people join the car? Like, maybe your family, maybe it's fine, but what about you giving a ride to a coworker, right? Like, they're like the change in context about where you are in the virtual world, who's around you. These mean actually like a lot of changes, and also for us intuitively mean a lot of changes in how we understand privacy and deal with sort of data collection and stuff like this. And also the other people in the car, right? They also have their own expectation. And so the context is really important in that as well. So
yes, and for our next trip, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, you're giving a ride to your colleague and you just take on the VR headset and your colleague becomes a dolphin or something. That's the magic of virtual reality in the vehicles. Yeah, I'm just kidding. It's just, I was also thinking like we managed to I think we managed to work with the data in smartphones, in web, desktop, and all of this type of technologies and hardwares and softwares and everything. And I think that we will manage the same for the mixed reality. I mean, virtual, augmented, and other types of realities. It just should be step-by-step experience, because for sure, no one gonna use the virtual reality from the day one when it's ready for vehicles experience, right? We will start with something simple. We will start with the mixed reality glasses that will give you the troubleshooting experience, or some remote assistance or something like that. That will enhance this experience a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and the type of data we collect in there as well. And I'm pretty sure that we can manage the regulations for collecting and analyzing and communicating this data. And Michael, you were saying about making it too complicated when you are communicating all types of data you collect in there. And I was thinking, yes, it's like if you try to install the AR app, like the regular AR app from the App Store or Play Market right now, it will ask you at least 5 permissions before you start the experience itself. And sometimes you can get frustrated and you think like, what the heck is it? And you just close the app and that's it. So yeah, not too overcomplicated. It's also a good thing in here.
As we come down to our last few minutes, if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If Nicole or Jameson, if one of you could throw my email in the chat in case anyone has follow-up questions, I would love to make that available for everyone. I thank all 3 of you for joining the panel today. The conversation could go on. For our next trick, we shall solve what happens when a passenger enters the vehicle. So I expect all of you to have that solved, next week. Just kidding. It will just continue to go on. As everyone heard, there are many challenges, but also many benefits, right? As those who work with ADAS features already in the vehicle, some of these immersive technologies might actually work hand in hand and might actually continue to enhance the experience and create a smoother on-ramp for these technologies to be incorporated into your everyday vehicle. We also heard that, the impact on the end user is important for the actual incorporation of the technology, but also really important for how you're communicating. I think communicating about the data and information collected, I think one thing all 3 of you highlighted that was really nice to hear is in this new immersive tech space, we are now, the world is, ears are open, eyes are on, data privacy, what that means for the consumer. And all 3 of you kind of highlighted how at the very upfront of collecting this information to allow these technologies to work, you are being very clear and transparent, short, clear, and practical, as Michael said, in ensuring that all that information is given kind of upfront. There is a bit of user fatigue, as Daria mentioned, with downloading the app and having 5 permissions you must agree to. So we're still working on the space of understanding how to make sure that the consumer is comfortable and aware of what's happening, while also not hindering potential application and uses. And on the back end, the information that researchers and companies need to actually function these technologies. Again, it's not a perfect incorporation, but it's definitely getting there. I do again want to thank all 3 of you for your time today, and for joining for the conversation. I look forward to more conversations in this space as we move forward. I will say that our panel today was recorded, and that should be available for all in the coming days, next couple of weeks even. And then finally, please join us for our next immersive tech, the next panel in our immersive tech panel series. It'll be on education on October 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Thank you all for joining, and I appreciate all of you for your time and conversation.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Thank you very much. Be well.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Bye.